Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. I hope you guys had a good spring break. I am missing you guys so much. I wanted to come together for our morning meeting this morning, and we are going to read a book called The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read by Rita Lorraine Hubbard and a Caldecott Honor winner, Mora. Whenever young Mary Walker was tired, she would shield her eyes from the sun and watch the swallow-tailed kites dip and soar above the trees. That must be what it's like to be free, she thought. But Mary didn't watch for long. Even at only 8 years old, she knew the first rule of the Union Springs, Alabama plantation she lived on. Keep working. She knew the second rule, too. Slaves should not be taught to read or write or do anything that might help them learn to do so. Mary didn't stop working. She didn't learn to read either. But at the end of each long day of picking cotton, toting water to Papa and the other slaves who chopped wood for the train tracks, or helping Mama clean the big house, she would lie in her little bed next to the crumbling fireplace and think about those birds. When I'm free, I'll go where I want and rest when I want, and I'll learn to read too. When she was 15, it happened. Mary and her mother, brothers, and sister were free. The Emancipation Proclamation said so. What it didn't say was how a family with nothing except the tattered garments on their backs could find food, clothes, and a place to sleep. Mary's father had died, and the family was on its own. Freedom Road to Freedom Road. Across fields and through woods, ex-slaves surged like waves crashing hard to shore. Now that they were free, every road was Freedom Road. Many headed north and west and every which way, searching for long-lost family members or simply experiencing the wonder of being free. Others, like Mary, chose to stay in the South. An organization called the Freedom's Bureau helped those who stayed to find shelter on abandoned Confederate land. Mary and her family settled in a one-room cabin, and for the next few years she worked alongside her mama to help feed her siblings. 7 days a week, she churned butter, cleaned houses, and cared for other folks' children. The hours were long, and if Mary was thirsty or hungry or needed to use the outhouse, she had to wait until she got home. At week's end, she would offer Mama the one lonely quarter she had earned. So 1 quarter a week for all that hard work. One day, Mama met a group of evangelists on the roadside. A woman with soft wrinkles in her kindly face placed a big, beautiful Bible in Mary's hands and told her, "Your civil rights are in these pages." Mary didn't know what civil rights were. She only knew that top to bottom, front to back, that book was filled with words. "I'm going to learn to read those words," she vowed. But not today. Today, there was work to be done. And tomorrow, too. When Mary got married, she and her husband worked as sharecroppers, renting someone else's house, using someone else's tools, and planting someone else's seeds to farm land they would never own. After they harvested the crops, almost all the money they earned went to pay for the housing, tool, and seed costs. Mary was 20 years old when her first son was born. She opened her Bible and marveled at the squiggles inside. There had been no time to learn to read. A friend wrote Mary's son's birth date in the Bible, August 26, 1869. Then Mary dipped a pen into an inkwell and made her mark beside it. Not a letter, not a name, just a mark. It was the best she could do. One day, Mary's husband died. She married again, and a second son was born. Then a third. Mary made marks for these sons too. Now she had 3 growing boys. More money, that's what we need, Mary thought. But the only other jobs available to black women were as maids or nannies or cooks. The hours were long with only half a day off on Saturdays, and like sharecropping, they didn't pay much. Mary sighed. Words would have to wait. For the next 4 decades, Mary sharecropped and did odd jobs to help support her family. In 1917, Mary's family moved to the little city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was the year of Chattanooga's Great Flood. The story was in all the newspapers, but Mary could only study the pictures to understand what had happened. Okay, so she still doesn't know how to read, and that's why she's having to only use the pictures to help her make sense of it. By now, Mary was 68 and too old to sharecrop, but she continued to work, cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. She also fried fish, baked cakes, and sold sandwiches to raise money for her church. On Sundays, she would sit in the congregation, and as the preacher spoke, she would clutch her family Bible. The Bible she still couldn't read. When Mary was well past 90, she and her husband sat in their creaky rockers while one or another of their sons read to them. After the 2 younger boys died, the eldest read. Then Mary's husband died. And several years later, her eldest son died too. He was 94. Mary had outlived her entire family. She was 114 years old and alone. "Can't read," she said. "Can't write. I don't know anything." Mary stood at the window of her retirement home and gazed down at the world below. Words were everywhere, on billboards, on buildings, on store windows and trucks. She sighed. All this time, she thought, and they still look like squiggles. Okay, so to her, buildings and billboards, they just look like scribbles because she doesn't know how to read. Mary had heard about a new reading class held in her building. She pursed her lips. No more waiting, she decided. Time to learn. Out of her apartment and into an elevator and down to the lobby she went. When the elevator doors sprang open, Mary saw people sitting under a sign with a picture of an open book. She could not read the words. A neighbor walked up to her. "That's a reading class, Miss Mary. Can I help you over?" Mary shook her head. Then she gripped her cane, lifted her chin, and walked straight towards that sign. For the next year and more, Mary put everything she had into learning to read. It wasn't easy, after all. She was the oldest student in the class, and probably in the entire country. Could someone her age learn to read? She didn't know, but by God, she was going to try. She studied the alphabet until her eyes watered. She memorized the sounds each letter made and practiced writing her name so many times that her fingers cramped. She learned to recognize sight words and then challenged herself to make short sentences with them. She studied and studied until books and pages and letters and words swirled in her head while she slept. So she's using sight words kind of like you guys did in like 1st and 2nd grade and even kindergarten. But she's 114 years old. One fine day, Mary's hard work had paid off. She could read. Word of her accomplishment traveled, and people everywhere celebrated with her. Chattanooga's mayor, newspaper journalists across the country, and a man from the U.S. Department of Education who said, "Mrs. Mary Walker, I pronounce you the nation's oldest student," all shared her joy. Mary felt complete. She still missed her sons, but whenever she was lonely, she read from her Bible or looked out her window and read the words on the street below. From then on, Chattanooga's honored Mary's achievement with yearly birthday parties. In 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson sent well wishes on Mary's 118th birthday, and in 1969, President Richard Nixon did the same. Mary was now 121 years old. And look, so now when she sees the signs outside, she can read them and she can see that they actually say words that explain what each store is. Mary received many gifts over the years. A radio, a sofa, her very first television, a new Bible, the key to the city, and perfume and champagne from the Canadian Mounties. She also received something that brought back those long days in the Alabama cotton fields, her first airplane ride. From the cockpit window, Mary gazed at the trees and rooftops below. No different than a horse and buggy ride, she joked, but she knew it was. As the airplane dipped and soared like those swallow-tailed kites of long ago, Mary decided that flying was a lot like reading. They both made a body feel safe and free as a bird. Each year before her birthday celebration came to an end, someone would whisper, "Let's listen to Miss Mary." The shuffling and movement would fade away until not a sound was heard. Then Mary would stand on her old legs, clear her old throat, and read from her Bible or her school book in a voice that was clear and strong. When she finished, she would gently close her book and say, "You're never too old to learn." The end. And then there is a little bit of an author's note at the end that talks about Mary's death. She died at the age of 121. But before her death, on December 1st, 1969, she could still see and hear well. She could still hold a pencil and write her name steadily, and she could walk with only minimal help with her trusty cane. She could also still sew beautiful bonnets and bake cakes that she bragged were light as a feather. She lived through 26 presidents, and today historical marker 2A73 stands at 3031 Wilcox Boulevard in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to commemorate her amazing life. So it's actually a true story. And here are some pictures of her. All right, so that was our read aloud for today. It's called The Oldest Student, and I read this book and I thought you guys would enjoy it. I hope you guys have a good day and a good week, and I hope to see you soon. Bye, guys.